So, the subject for the first hour this afternoon is metaphysics, which is the real meaning of Sufism. In Arabic or in Persian, Sufism is called tasawwuf. And tasawwuf means the vision of things beyond. I know that a lot of people feel they want to know, how to develop things in themselves, and the metaphysics seems a little bit too remote. But it's like, for example, a worker in a factory saying, I don't care to know how the factory is run. I think one does want to know how the factory is run. And I think when there are moments when the consciousness of higher planes begins to emerge through the veil, and if one has a reminder of the conditions of things in the higher spheres, and also the story of one's descent on earth and how one will fare in the heavens after one's passing, I think that not only makes sense of one's life, but it also prepares oneself for death and resurrection, because the whole of life is an involvement in the passage from the transient to the eternal. If you ask what do the realized beings experience in their highest consciousness, in their meditation, well, of course, certain ones, at least all planes of consciousness at the same time. But certainly at the summit of their being, there's a consciousness of oneness. And whenever, Hazrat Inayat Khan says, whenever a being, that is a fragment of the totality, experiences that state in which he was before he was involved in becoming, he reaches the fulfillment of his being. You see, we're used to seeing things from the point of view of man, and is that which imprisons us and causes us suffering that arises out of our limitation. Whereas what the Master is continually trying to do is to make us see things from the point of view of the Masters. And there one sees the wide horizon instead of the limited perspective. It is the consciousness itself which has involved a part of itself in its creation, while a part remains as creator, exactly as water frozen into ice, and yet water abides within, and the ice lasts only for the time that it is frozen. All things have been created out of it, and when their time of existence is finished, all return and merge into it. Now, the Sufis recognize 4 stages in the descent, let's say, of the one and only being into multiplicity, and they are called by the terms which you should know, of course. They're Persian terms: ilm, ishq, wujud, shahud. Ilm is a stage in which the consciousness acts as intelligence. Ishq is a stage when the activity of the rays of consciousness have increased, and this has caused confusion among the rays and made power out of intelligence, which is will in simple terms, and in poetic terms, love. Third stage is consciousness, wujud, the creation of vehicles such as mind, body, and the 4th step is shahud, where the consciousness has reached its utmost goal. Now, we'll try to explain this a little further. Now, within the, first of all, in the beginning is the silent life that some of us experience in the highest consciousness that we ever retain in meditation, the silent life where all multiplicity has disappeared, where all egos have fallen out of focus and there's only unity. And this is what is meant when we say La ilaha illallahu. Now, out of this silent, absolute state, there arises simply what one might call self-consciousness, God conscious of himself, and when Moshe says, of his existence, unlimited by knowledge of form and space. So, in this, there is no knowledge of any multiplicity, any beings or any attributes or any qualities or space or time or anything of the kind. There is just pure intelligence. And then, out of this pure intelligence awakens or emerges nostalgia. And the word that is used is ishq. So at first, ilm, which is ya'alim, for example, ilm, knowledge. The second one is ishq, which is, well, it can be translated by love, it can be translated by desire, it can be translated by nostalgia. I like the word nostalgia. In other words, all was born out of the divine love. Intelligence became love. And which obviously is finally the wish to share what is already contained in the one. It's altruism, let's say, it's this outpouring of love. I've often quoted, first of all, the hadith that is to be found in the basis of Sufism. There's, of the tasawwuf of Sufism, there's a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad that says, God speaking, I was a hidden treasure and desired to be known, and the whole creation is the way in which I am able to see myself. It's the kind of projection of God into creation, and through this he can see himself. Well, that's ilm. That's the first attribute that we talked about. That would be the purpose of all, that the unknown becomes known to himself by projecting himself in a multitude. All the latencies within him manifest to view. And then the dervish, Nifari, who was this madman who came out of the desert and who said things that were, we have them, many those words, they've been published. Nifari's works have been published. And it just doesn't seem to make sense at first until you go in more and deeper into it, and you realize that it's the ultimate sense and everything else doesn't make sense, and it's the only thing that makes sense. You have to get to that, in that state of matsubiyat, that state of intoxication. And you can see from his point of view. And he said, no, it wasn't in order to know himself that God created the universe. It was out of love. It was out of love for you who had not yet existed. Like it was for the love of the possibility of your existence that he drew you out of himself. And in fact, that he departed from his state of unknowing. It's like the first renunciation or the first sacrifice is God crucified from the beginning of time so that we may be free. It's the kind of idea that you have. And so, was the cause of all of this knowledge? Was the cause of all of it love? That is what we have to find out in ourselves, of course. Both and more still. Now the next descent, let us say, the word is used by the Sufis as tanazulat, which means descent, is to seek, the tendency of intelligence to seek an object, even as the eyes seek something to look at and the ears something to hear. Ibn Arabi speaks about this nostalgia of God to see himself in another himself, which every human being shares, of course, who is, however, not quite himself because it's a limitation of himself. And yet, because it's a limitation, it is a means whereby he can contemplate himself. In other words, it is the longing for existence. It's the being going out of himself and becoming a reality, as Hazrat Inayat Khan says, in the flesh. And we all experience that. We experience, for example, we have a plan, and then when we make that plan concrete, now that's where we experience a great power and a great fulfillment. It's because we are experiencing wujud, you see, that is existence. We are realistic, one says, in the sense that we want to make an ideal a reality. And if we experience that, it is because originally, of course, God did so, or better still, because we are experiencing not only originally, but what is happening continually in, let's say, in the cosmos. But what happens then is that each part of the one and only consciousness thinks that he is a being. And that's what's happening to us, you see. Because of the limitations in which this consciousness is functioning. It split itself up, let's say, in so many different consciousnesses. But when the individual intelligence frees itself from this delusion and recognizes its immortal existence, then it becomes master of all states of being. It becomes that ideal being whose bliss cannot be equaled on earth nor surpassed in heaven. This state is the experience of intelligence when the knower becomes known to himself, and that is called shahud. Shahud means the witness. So, there was at first ilm, the desire to know. Then there was ishq, the nostalgia, love. Then there was existence, materialization. And then finally there is the fact that every part of the one and only consciousness becomes a witness. And in Islam they always say the role of man is to become a shaheed, which means a witness. And this is expressed by this surah that says, and God spoke to the souls of men when they were still in the loins of Adam and asked, "Am I your Lord?" And they said, "Yes, we will affirm it." It was that "I will" that established the relative autonomy of man, his promise to affirm the oneness. And that's why when we say La ilaha illallah, we are reiterating the promise that we made in the beginning of time to affirm the oneness of God. Now, of course, one recognizes 7 different stages in the descent. The correspondence exactly between these 4 states of the Absolute and the 7 stages of descent, or 7 heavens, is difficult to establish. It can be established. In fact, I have established it. But that just becomes a little bit complicated. So this is the knowledge of the heavenly planes, of the different stages through which we descended on our way to manifestation, and of course the different stages through which we will ascend in our return, and also corresponds to the different stages that we can experience in meditation. And so it constitutes a kind of topography of states of consciousness, which is very useful to us, because in meditation, when we're in a state of meditation, we may not know where on earth or what on earth, what we are experiencing and how it is situated in the whole realm of things. We might think, well, this is it, you see, and actually we're experiencing light. And it might be necessary for us to overcome the joy of experiencing light in order to lift our consciousness to a plane beyond light, you see. So it's good for us to know what these different planes are. So the highest plane is, of course, is called ahadiyat. This word you find in the Surat of the Quran, which is often used by the Sufis in India. It's called Surat al-Ikhlas. Kulhu Allahu Ahad, Allahu Samad, Lam Yalid Walam Yulad Walam Yakul Lahu Kufuwan Ahad. Ahad, you see. Ahad means the one. And of all the wazifas, of all the sifat, it means of all the attributes, this is the ultimate one, and this is the one that is experienced by the contemplatives in their highest consciousness. They experience the oneness. The oneness in which there is absolutely no vestige of multiplicity. So this is the same condition as is described by the Hindus, called Nirve Kalpa Samadhi. That means Nirve without Kalpa, without, or Nirve Bija, for example, without any seed, without any, even the vestige of attributes or archetypes, no qualities, just the one. If you long for qualities and you find yourself landed in that place, you will be bored and you will try to come back down to a place where there are attributes. And that's why God said to Abu Yazid Bastami, you are not strong enough to stand the loneliness of my unity. It's only those who have the courage to go into the loneliness of the divine oneness, when we know what that means. Just imagine being catapulted into outer space, the loneliness of outer space, but still you're in space. But this is being beyond space. And also, where there are no persons, there are no qualities, there are no emotions, there is just the absolute. Well, this is what we're frightened of. We're frightened of that which is too strong for us to encompass. And that's why we don't experience it. So there's no use of being frightened of it, because we are not able to experience it. When we are able to experience it, we will long for it. We experience it a little bit, like at those moments when we just long to get away from all of it, long for peace. Well, somehow vaguely we're experiencing a longing for the ahadiyat state. Now the next stage, we call Vahdat, is, there's a consciousness of being, as we said a moment ago in Ilm, consciousness of being, but not of what that being is. I don't know whether you can... That is, of course, what the Hindus call Nivekara Samadhi. That is, when one is not conscious of any qualities, but one is just conscious of being. In other words, it seems that the being of God is something that he becomes conscious of at a certain stage in the descent, and that originally he is not conscious of being. Because this, you see, the higher state corresponds to what Buddha calls the planes beyond being, you see. And so, you see, for us, for people in ordinary consciousness, it doesn't seem that there can be anything if it isn't being, if it doesn't exist, if it isn't in existence. And it is only the one who comes to the higher realization, who realizes that existence is only a state. It's a state. It doesn't have to be, it can be, and it doesn't add anything to what was before existence. So, Vahdat therefore is the beginning of existence, and in that state there's just the consciousness of existence. For example, maybe when you wake up in the morning, there's that moment when you are conscious of existing, without knowing what you are, or who you are, where you are, just of existing. There's just that flash, and then it goes, because then you descend, consciousness descends a little lower. You may experience it in meditation when you have lost the sense, conscious of the qualities of life, or when it's just life, you see. For example, you become pure spirit, and wherever you go, you communicate life to all beings. That's that very high consciousness of pure existence. It's a very high state of consciousness. And it is beyond time and space. And it can happen in your meditation that you have been catapulted beyond time and space, that you remember having, that you left your body somewhere in space. And your body was kind of involved in time. But somehow you are not in space, and in fact you are, but you don't exist. Now there's a difference between those two things, to be and to exist. In French, of course, être et exister is very, very clear, the difference between the two. Now, within this, now there's a further descent into manifestation, and in this case, the one and only being manifests to his own view. In other words, the whole manifestation is the way in which whole creation, let's say, what we call creation, which is it's a Catholic, it's a Christian concept. No, it's a Jewish concept actually. It's a Semitic concept, creation. Like there's God, and then there's creation. Like there's an artist, and then there's his picture, the picture that he's painted. But then you know that there's the Plotinian, the Hellenic concept of emanation. That is, creation is not ex nihilo, out of nothing, but it flowed out of the one. It's an emanation, you see. And I think the Sufi metaphysics has been very strongly influenced by Hellenic thought. You see, that which was contained as a potentiality within God manifests to his view. And the point is that whenever we experience anything, we are part of that process whereby God manifests himself to his own view, and we are the instruments of that experience. And so we think that we are experiencing something. And the fact is that what is happening is that God is experiencing himself, and we are just the instruments to which it's happening. That's that's Maya. That's what is meant by Maya. And here, Hazrat Inayat says that the first form of manifestation is vibration, and I'm sure that every musician feels happy about that. It seems that sound seems to be hierarchically above light. Even scientifically, sound is pure vibration. Light particles begin to emerge out of the vibrations. In the beginning was the Word was God. Anyway, these seem to be the two activities at what seems to be the causal level. It's called Vahdaniyat, the causal level, fifth plane. So I suppose that perhaps in our meditation we can experience it. We can reach a point when we experience what we call the Akashic plane, pure vibration. Maybe after death we might reach a point when we reach the place of being a vibration, and just a vibration in a symphony of vibration. But then there's a kind of condensation of the vibrations that become light, and that is then the world of light. And these two planes seem to be so deeply interconnected at that level that they're really indistinguishable. And for us, of course, we have these specialized senses of hearing and seeing through the ears and the eyes, and therefore we distinguish these very well. But it is possible that in our higher consciousness, light is convertible into vibration, and vibration is convertible into light. So these two things are so very deeply interconnected that one experiences them as a totality. Anyway, this is really the causal plane in its initial form. Maybe, well, what we mean by the causal plane differs from person to person. Let's say the plane at which the causes of all existence begin to dawn, to emerge. These are, let's say, one could say it is the world of first causes. Moshe says, the first activity of consciousness produces sound, and the clashings and groupings of vibrations produce light. The third heaven is called Wahdaniyat. So, are the clashings of vibrations, there would be this kind of fireworks that is, when we think of the stars and the planets and the suns, because the stars are our suns. When you think of the stardust of the galaxies, actually it is a world of light. The distances are so great between them that it's difficult for us to see the whole thing as one web of light, but that's what it is. And in the experience of the contemplatives, and I'm sure that some of you have that experience, you lift your consciousness into a world of light, where you realize that you belong to the world of light. But at this stage is above individuation. That means that the souls are not yet born at this level. It's too cosmic. The fragmentation at the level of what we call individuality takes place much lower down. Because then at the next level, which is called arwah, and that is the level at which the souls are formed, and the word that is used for the soul in its higher sense is ruh, which really means spirit. Arwah means the world of spirits. Spirits in the higher in the sense of being higher than souls. Now, it is here that the attributes are formed. Each attribute differing in quality and quantity, each distinguishing itself as an individual soul. Now, we have to distinguish between two things. The attributes, let's say the world of attributes, which I think is really the causal plane, the world of archetypes, and then the souls, which are made of the material of the attributes. So each one of us is a certain composition of joy and peace and compassion and whatever, power, whatever. So we realize, of course, that the higher we reach into the roots of our being, let's imagine that our roots are upwards instead of downwards, the less personal we are, the more impersonal we are. And so where is exactly the frontier of our individuality? It's very difficult to determine, but one can only say that at this plane, let's say in the higher regions of this plane that's called arwah, there's just qualities, just attributes. And that these attributes seem to coalesce, let's say, in structures which are, let's say, the souls of beings. Can you experience yourself at that level? That is one of the things that we've been trying to do in our meditations, of experiencing what I call your eternal being, that really experiencing yourself as qualities. When you can say, yes, this is what I am. This is what I am. Yeah. Then you're really experiencing your being. This this is what I am. And you can't describe it in words, perhaps. You could try to and say, I am light, or I am power, or whatever. But those words are not at all sufficient, of course. Whenever you reach the point when you experience yourself as qualities, and that's the reason why we do these wazifas, why we have the meditations on the qualities, because it makes you conscious of what your real being is. That means that you are functioning at this level here, the level of arwah. Now, the next plane, called Arsam, is the plane in which Moshe says the soul, with its collected attributes, waits to turn into matter, and each ray has projected itself from the spiritual plane in diverse forms under the influence of the 5 elements. It is the realm of ideas, and he calls it Arsam, and those who have been inhabited but who do not proceed further have been called Jinn or Peri. So this would be the plane of the jinns, which is the domain of Indra, according to Hindu thought. You see, the devas are the jinns. You know the difference between the devas and the suras. Suras are the angels, devas are the jinns. The jinn quality you find in developing in a child. In the baby, there's the angelic quality generally, and then at a certain moment, the jinn quality begins to manifest in him, and he's just so interested in understanding things and so bright and witty, and that's the jinn quality. The realm of ideas. So the attributes have now diversified themselves a little more and become ideas. That's the realm of the Eidos of Plato, for example, the world of ideas. And so perhaps you may in your meditation remember having passed through the jinn plane and having been enthused by all that creativity that goes on in the jinn plane, and which eventually results in the formation of the mind. But, of course, it is true that Hazrat Inayat says the mind is then formed, I would say fully formed then, or completed, in the next plane, which is mithal. And the word mithal is a very interesting word because it's the same etymology as the word myth in Greek, mythology. And it is the plane that Jung calls the collective unconscious. It's the plane of the thinking of humanity, or even the thinking of the planet. You see, actually, we're always thinking of ourselves, but we could think of the planet as a whole. And we can think that the planet has evolved a thinking skin, as Teilhard de Chardin calls it. But this thinking skin was already formed before, but let's say the organic matter was able to house this thinking skin into its accommodation. Now this plane is called the world of spirit phantoms, and maybe some of you experience this plane in astral flight, in sleep. The world of there are beings who have not evolved higher than after their death. They have stayed at the plane of mithal. It means they were too attached to their ideas, and therefore they weren't able to lift themselves upwards. Like, for example, after death you can become encapsulated in your thoughts. For example, you don't have a body to function, to make you communicate with other beings. Well, you could communicate directly with other beings in your thoughts, but you shy away, you close yourself in your thoughts, like you do when you You close your door and you sit in your room and you're alone with your thoughts. But the difference is that those thoughts become very, very intense because there's no physical reality to communicate with. So that is the reality, and you are really living in a world which you create. You see, the Hindus make this distinction between the kind of experience that you have of a physical world that seems other than yourself, or then the experience that you have in your imagination when you are not only the witness, but you're also the creator of what you witness. And that's the world. The world of Mithal is the world of imagination. The world of the astral world, the world of spirit phantoms, is a world where people evolve in their own creativity. Of course, they are drawing their forms, the forms of their creativity, out of the causal plane, let's say the plane of archetypes. But they are unfolding all the potentialities in the plane of archetypes, and just like, for example, when you're dreaming, your dream is a reality to you. And so in the plane of phantom spirits, you are living a reality which is no less real than physical reality. It just has a different nature than physical reality because you are continually creating it out of the archetypes, which of course are absolutely permanent. And then of course comes the seventh plane that we think we know about, at least, and it's called Insan, which means the plane of manifestation. Now, the Sufis distinguish again two things, Zat and Sifat, and these two words, which we will come across many times, correspond exactly with Purusha and Prakriti. So, Zat means just the pure essence, beyond all being, just pure essence. And there's a wonderful practice which we do also, the Sufis do, and which is also a Hindu practice, and it consists in watching that in you which is subject to change, called Prakriti, and that in you which is unchanging, and that is, of course, Purusha or Zat. And if you're able to do this, and if you're able then to really identify with that which is permanent, which is Zat, then you experience divine consciousness. Yeah. Now, one could say that Zat and Sifat are considered in one way as the two poles, in a sense as the two poles, the top pole and the bottom pole. So all manifestation springs out of the essence, emerges out of the essence, and descends into Sifat. Sifat means really the qualities. And Zat, beyond all qualities, being. In German, if those of you who know German, there's a difference between Sein and Wesen. It's a very important distinction that you found in Latin. Esse and posse. Well, that's the fundamental distinction. Now, the Sufis distinguish two currents, an upward current and a downward current. The upward current is Uruj, the downward current Nuzul or Nazul. And we'll come across it again when we speak about Jalal, Jamal, and Kamal. For example, every undertaking that you undertake starts at the 0 point. It's just like, for example, imagine the grain that is placed under the earth in the autumn, and then at a certain moment in spring it begins to emerge above the little seedling begins to emerge above the earth, and then it grows and grows and grows and reaches its its fullness on the day of on the 21st of June, and then it diminishes and diminishes, and gradually it passes through a kind of 0 point at about Christmas time, and then it arises again. There's a kind of cycle. And everything in our lives is, of course, cyclic and follows the same process. And so Uruj represents the upward motion from, let's say, midnight till midday, or from Christmas to St. John's Day. And Nazul represents the drop from the zenith to right down to under the earth. And so, according to the Sufis, Zat projects Sifat from its own self and also absorbs it within itself. And this is called the breathing of God, breathing in and out. And so manifestation is the out-breath of God, and it goes from Zat to Sifat. And of course, our spiritual life is always the return, as Jalaluddin says, to the origin. So we must understand that we are experiencing these two forces in us, and as we descend in life, the vibrations of the plane of Arwah turn into atoms. Murshid said, and descending from the ether in their breaths become fire or passion that passes into water, and from fluid becomes flesh of the earth. Out of darkness, out of an enshrouding blindness and mist arises desire, which goes through the fire and agony of passion before it becomes material and incarnate. If we could only see the whole panorama of existence, who can say how many times man has appeared on the earth and disappeared from the earth? What we know is only one history of the planet. But how many planets have been involved in it? And how about life on the other planets? What Brahma creates in 1,000 years, Shiva destroys in 1 moment. And so it is that the nature of the ray is to extend and withdraw. And so we also are experiencing the extension of that ray that is our soul, and then also its withdrawal. And the spiritual life consists in the withdrawal of that ray, which reintegrates the source, and that's why Jalaluddin speaks about the nostalgia of the flute of reed to return to its root. Now, manifestation in the human form, Murshid calls the utmost boundary of manifestation. That's the furthest that any soul can go. And he says that the coming breath, the soul enters the physical sphere by the channel of breath. Our inheritance. Have you ever pondered upon your inheritance? Have you ever felt in yourself that which you have inherited from your father, that which you've inherited from your mother, that which you've inherited from your grandparents, that which you've inherited from very distant ancestors, perhaps way back in the Dark Ages, that which you have inherited from your angelic origins, that which you've inherited from the jinn plane, that which you have inherited from your divine inheritance. You see, it was that which Christ spoke about when he said he is the Son of God. It was because he was conscious of his divine inheritance. And the man who thinks that he is the son of a person is conscious of his inheritance from that person. And so it's very important in our meditations to be able to experience our inheritance. So can we try to ponder and maybe even remember our experiences before birth? Experience yourself as a being of light that has had so far no connection with the physical plane whatsoever, and of course it is conscious, in which a thinking has been developing. And imagine then that you come across beings who have come from the earth plane after their death, you see. You come across a doctor, for example, and he tells you all about the human body. And you tell him all about the things which you have experienced lately in the plane that you have been moving in. And then you come upon the earth. Or rather, your power draws the parents together. Your nostalgia for existence catches the parents in the miracle of love, and through the interfusion of their bodies, a body is produced which you then interfuse with, and you actually form a pattern within the womb of the mother. You actually impress your particular being upon the flesh that is being forming in the womb of the mother. And that is how you are a denizen of the heavens, and you have come to visit planet Earth, and in order to visit planet Earth you have had to interfuse so deeply with the product of the earth, which is the body, that it becomes really part of you, because you have stamped it with the particular hallmark of your being. And now you inherit even in your whole being, in your soul, you inherit some of the qualities of your parents. That means that you have acquired through the body, but they affect your soul. But of course, while you were being born, you were so deeply in communication with the souls of your parents that you did take upon yourself some of the nature of your parents. But it acts much stronger still in your very blood. But you have the memory of all that has come into the formation of your body. It's in your body. It's everything has collected as memory. So you can remember the whole history of the planet. It's all there in your body, but it doesn't come to life. It doesn't. It's recessive, as the biologists say, because it would be too much if you were to remember all of that. You wouldn't be able to deal with the immediate problems. But it's there. And in meditation, if your attention is taken away from immediate occupation, you're able to experience this whole continuity of life as it has come into your being. That is inheritance. In fact, that is what we are. We are inheritance. We are the inheritance of so many different lines, let us say, threads converging upon a point. And we are all those things. We are our parents, and we are our grandparents, and we are our ancestors, and we are the angels who were our predecessors, and we are God Himself. What an extraordinary convergence of all these qualities. our individual lives, in as much as we can talk of individual lives, of course, only make sense in the context of an overall purpose. And so, of course, our decisions at first will be made in the limitation of our understanding. As we evolve, we shall learn to give up what seems to be our individual interest for an overall interest, for, let's say, a greater interest, a cosmic interest. And that's where a person becomes really cosmic. And otherwise, he's a little man. He just follows his ego and things, and he's a little man. And the great man, the great being, has become absolutely cosmic. And that's, of course, what you feel. That the reason why you go and seek for a rishi or a holy man. What is it? It's because you feel the vastness of his consciousness. And somehow it makes sense to you. Somehow the limitation of one's ego weighs down upon one. One feels so fed up with oneself. The tyranny of the self weighs upon one. Comes across the vastness of a being. And what does it mean? It means that he sees a wide purpose behind all things. And you see the narrow purpose of your own vision. And his vision opens the frontiers of your being, and you begin to see vast. That's the influence of a master upon a disciple. That's what it is. And so you are considering, for example, you come to a teacher and ask, what about your problems, what you're supposed to do. And he sees the overall purpose. Maybe he can't bring it to you because of the limits of your conception of things, because everyone is a horizon. According to the Sufis, the limitation of a being is his horizon. That means as far as he can see. That's his limitation. And so the teacher is trying to bring the vastness into that limitation. So of course, you will, in order to accommodate this vastness, your horizon will have to extend. That's what happens. And so he brings to you the purpose behind the purpose of your life. An overall purpose. How can we explain this a little more clearly? I'll give you an example. Supposing it's taken from the example of a musician. Supposing a man is a cellist in an orchestra, and he's a good cellist, and maybe he realizes that his playing contributes towards the success of the performance, because the whole orchestra depends upon his, the whole orchestra depends upon the perfection of each instrumentalist. Well, he sees his purpose, which is playing the cello, but then he sees a higher purpose, which is the good of the orchestra. And, perhaps presumably that's as far as he goes. But supposing that, like Pablo Casals, for example, he should give up playing the cello and starting to compose. Now, in order to be able to compose, he will have to experience something of the meaning of life. He'll have to bring into his composition something of the vastness of the drama in the heavens, or let's say the cosmic drama enacted on the earth. He has to develop a greater vastness to be able to compose than in playing the cello in the orchestra. This is an example of how behind one purpose there's another purpose that is vaster still, and behind that purpose there's a still vaster purpose. And so Hazrat Inayat Khan teaches one to continually see a purpose behind a purpose. That is, continually examine your purpose in view of a wider purpose. So whatever you're doing, like for example, as I say, you're washing dishes, or you're in a business or whatever, see the purpose of that business, right? It's not good enough just to say, well, this is my business and then I'm going to meditate in the evening. It's just two drawers. One opens up one drawer and closes it and opens up another. No. Now, what part does this business play in, let's say, in life? And so if you can see, yes, by this business now I'm developing perseverance, I'm developing fortitude, I'm developing insight into people. A business, well, you're dealing with people, right? I am helping people. I'm showing are you showing compassion to people? Do you see how this business is working in the whole of society, how it contributes towards well-being? Does it really contribute to well-being? And then see all that you can bring into it, right? And all right, well, then you realize, well, you do the maximum that you can within that action. And then you find that, well, I've outgrown my business now. There are other people who can do it just as well. I give it over to them, and now I feel I must do something else. That's because you have been seeking for an overall purpose behind your individual purpose. You see, it's quite a different thing to meditating on the absolute and then getting back into the job again. But this is a meditation that you can conduct continually, while you're involved in your action. And of course, you can do it every day. I would say at the end of the daily meditation, just stop everything and examine your lives from the point of view of an overall purpose. Now, should we do that now, just for a moment? Yes, so then I spoke about the word desire that enters very strongly in the teaching of Hazrat Inayat Khan when he says, let thy wish become my desire. It is the interest of the Creator that has made this creation. There is no impulse which in its beginning is wrong or purposeless or out of harmony, for in the sum total of all things every impulse has its purpose. It is during the process through which the impulse passes that it becomes right or wrong, but not at the beginning or at the end. For the beginning has a purpose and the end has answered the demand. Every desire you accomplish is one step further towards that final goal which every soul ultimately has to reach. If you tell yourself you do not desire anything, you go back. This whole creation is the result of desire. The purpose of creation, therefore, must be the fulfillment of this desire. Thus, the first step towards accomplishment or attainment, whether it be spiritual or worldly, will also be to proceed with purpose towards the goal of your desire. And that's why Moshe says, indifference is attained by developing interest and by developing discrimination in one's interest. Indifference is attained by developing interest and then by developing discrimination in one's interest. You see.